Hello, I'm Xiomy, and I'm interviewing Dr. Davidson. Today's date is June 9th, 2022, and we're in St. Augustine. Dr. Davidson, you are the associate professor at UF. You teach anthropology. You're, an accomplished archaeologist. You've worked on sites like the Kingsley Plantation and the first and second forts of Fort Mose. Can we start with you spelling your name?
James Davidson, James, Davidson.
All right, thank you. When and where were you born?
I was born August 28th, 1967 in Odessa, Texas at the, I can't remember what the hospital was called, but it's the primary hospital in Odessa. So, the Summer of Love, 1967.
All right. Can I ask your parents' names and
Sure.
where they were born?
Jimmy Frederick Davidson was born in 1935 in Gilmore County, Texas. He was born in a tent on the side of the road as they were traveling from Arkansas to West Texas. They didn't quite make it to a house. They were born in a tent. And then my mother was born, I think at home birth in 1940 in Odessa, Texas.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have any siblings?
I have an older sister named Samantha who was born in 1965.
Okay, and that's it?
Yeah, that's it.
All right. Can I ask where you went to school?
Well, I went to Mrs. Murphy's kindergarten. I went to Ross Elementary.
Okay.
I went
And that was in Texas?
all in Odessa, yeah.
Okay.
John B. Hood Junior High, recently renamed because he was a Confederate scoundrel. So they get rid of that. Permian High School, and then from Permian High School I went to Odessa College, which is the junior college, to get some of the basics out of the way at a very cheap cost, so I had my job working at a pharmacy. I went to junior college, stayed at home, and then 2 years later I transferred to the University of Texas at Austin, and then I completed my bachelor's degree at UT Austin in 1990. I worked doing country archaeology in the Southwest for 2 years, did 4 years working at Freedman Cemetery in Dallas, and then went to grad school for my master's at the University of Arkansas from 96 to 99, and then my PhD at the University of Texas again from 1999 to 2004. And then while I was writing my dissertation, I was hired by the University of Florida in the spring of 2004.
So that's why you moved to Florida?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I applied for 9 jobs and I got one offer, and that was the one I took. And then I was not finished it. I had not finished writing my dissertation. So they said that, you just have to have your dissertation done by July. So I went back to Arkansas where I was at the time with my my then wife, and I wrote 300 pages in 10 weeks.
That's great.
And it wore me out.
So do you have an interest in Florida history?
Well, I didn't know much about Florida until I got here. The only site that I really heard of was Kingsley Plantation, and then Fort Mose, and I worked at both of them.
You worked at both of them?
Yeah, so I knew Kingsley being the beginning of plantation archaeology in 1968 with Charles Fairbanks' excavations there. And then I knew about Fort Mose from Kathy Deegan's and Jane Lander's article in the late 80s, early 90s, and then they did a chapter in the 1999 Teresa Singleton volume. So I knew that through grad school and through my readings then, and of course I knew about Fairbanks from my undergrad days. So that's what I knew, and that's where I ended up working.
Okay.
Oddly enough.
Can I ask about your work at the Kingsley Plantation? Like maybe what you did there?
Right, so Kingsley Plantation, I had a grad student named Erica Roberts who was very interested in doing that for her dissertation. She worked on a plantation in Louisiana, and so I came down with the idea that we would do this down the road, but she wanted to jump right on it. And so in 2005 we planned it, in 2006 we did our first summer. We right away got invested in the National Park Service, and the archaeology we did there was pretty straightforward. We were digging the floor of a slave cabin. Very simple, very straightforward. We found some amazing material. 2007, we came back to finish that cabin and expand to another cabin. 2008, I started working on other parts of the plantation. We started looking for the sugar mill. We started looking for pre-1812 cabins. We started looking for the cemetery and found it. We started testing a map from the 1850s, looked for lost buildings, and we found some of those. So it evolved over several years, and it took 8 years, 8 summers, to dig 4 cabins, the cemetery, the sugar mill, some white residences on Cedar Avenue, the Anna Kingsley house yard, and some other little side areas. So yeah, 8 summers there. An enormous amount of data, the largest data set of its kind in Florida, certainly. And then I needed a comparative, so we started working at Bulow Plantation, which is down in Ormond Beach. So they're contemporaneous. But whereas Zephaniah Kingsley was so Afrocentric that he married an African woman and had biracial children, that was his legal wife. John Bulow was a bit of a monster, a bit of a sadist. Used to beat people. He murdered 4 slaves. And so the comparison was going to be very stark, we thought. You know, plantation with a lot of latitude and a lot of Afrocentrism, and then a plantation where there's a despotic ruler who capriciously kills people on whims, drunken whims. So we did find a lot of disparities between the 2 cabin contexts. So it was a remarkable 5 summers at Bulow. So that's 13 years of plantation. And then we came to Fort Mose in 2019.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I also wanted to ask about like your mortuary studies. Can you talk a little bit about what that's about?
Sure. So I got my BA in 1990, and I had always planned to go to grad school, and I thought I was going to grad school that fall. And then my undergraduate professor, Dr. Thomas Hester, announced that the department at UT Austin was going to limit enrollment because they had reached some big number in the graduate program, and they weren't going to accept new students until some people graduated. So they dropped enrollment from like 15 a year to 3. And Hester pulled me aside. He said, "I'm sorry, but you're not going to be my pick, so you're not going to get an issue." But he said, maybe go to UT San Antonio, get a master's, and come back. So what he did instead was I started doing field archaeology. And so for 2 years, I was doing field archaeology. And then I thought, in New Mexico and Arizona, and I thought, well, now it's time to go back to grad school. So I went back in the fall of '91 to Austin, was ready to apply to UT San Antonio. And this is back before the internet, back before all that, and before cell phones. And so I knew I was admitted, but I knew I had till one day in December of '91 to physically drive down from Austin to San Antonio, which is about an hour's drive, and sign a piece of paper saying I was going to enter the program and sign up for courses. And I waited till the last minute, the last day, and I started driving south from Austin, and I got about 2 miles from my house, and my Volkswagen van, and just died on the side of the road. And I wasn't going to make it to to San Antonio by 5 p.m., and so I wasn't going to go to grad school that spring. So a friend of mine, Rolando Garza, who I worked with in New Mexico and Arizona, he had been telling me for over a year to come to Dallas and work on this cemetery project. And I said, really? I don't know. Is that really archaeology? What is that? And so I had a lot of free time on my hands now. I needed a job. I wasn't going to get into grad school till next fall. So I said, okay. So I talked to Rolando and I applied for this position in Dallas on the Freedman Cemetery project. And in March of 1992, I was hired. I was 24 years old. I had no training in mortuary archaeology. I had a class in osteology, but no training. I dug a couple of burials in Arizona, but I certainly wasn't an expert mortuary archaeologist. And I was one of the first field archaeologists hired. Rolando had been hired, and then there was me and 2 other guys. And I was there for the vast bulk of the project, and we went from, I think, 12 burials have been dug between December and March, so I missed the first 12, but I was there for every burial after that. And we ended up moving nearly 1,200 burials and an acre of graves, and it took 4 years. So I thought I was going to be there for a summer and go back to school, and that didn't work out. So in retrospect, I mean, that was the moment that my life changed. I made plans, and my plans didn't work out, and these alternate opportunities arose, and that was the thing that I ended up dedicating my life to do, right? I mean, archaeology before that had been fun. I like doing field archaeology. I like working in the Southwest, I like working on the Navajo Reservation, digging Mogollon sites and Anasazi sites. But I wasn't emotionally invested in a way, right? And so working on historic archaeology, something that was sort of the recent past, people with some living memories of those places and, you know, direct descendants of people who were buried there. I was emotionally invested. I felt like I was doing good work for the present. I was very political. You know, these people had been wronged, both the community and these individuals buried in that cemetery. And so I felt very personal. I was inspired. And so it became an emotional journey, a political journey, all that. And so I decided, you know, within the 6 months that I was going to stick it out, go to grad school, write this is my thesis, dissertation, and I'm going to change my entire career. And if I'd driven a better car in 1991, I would not be talking to you because I would not have gone down this path at all. I'd be somewhere in New Mexico right now, you know, digging pueblos.
That's crazy.
I would probably be happy enough, I guess, but I would not be, I think, as successful or as fulfilled, I think, right? So yeah, that was a whim. And so I tell my students that it's good to have plans, but it's also good to recognize opportunities when they arise, and to pursue them. And you know, there's no guarantees. You know, Freedman Cemetery was difficult. It was politically full of landmines. A lot of people who worked on that project were soured on it. They were kind of blackballed or felt burned by it politically. Not that many people continued on in the field after that project. There was only a couple of folks who did, and I was one of them. And I, by random luck or by judicious planning or something, I was able to navigate all the landmines and come out at the end. So it was, you know, it was an experience, and it was hard. It's hard to describe all the ins and outs of what happened there, but yeah. So here I am, and it's all because of that one chance, you know, encounter with the idea of not going to grad school and taking a job in the interim, and you know, here I am.
So you were talking a lot about the challenges you were facing with the cemeteries. Do you feel like you're having a similar situation here at Fort Mose?
Well, sure. So Fort Mose is political, and I did not think it was as political in my naivete, because you know, like what happened in Dallas was that they desecrated a cemetery and several thousand graves.
Yeah, of course.
And it happened in 1947. So that's pretty recent. There were a lot of people who were alive in 47 who were there alive in the 90s, and they were pissed off about it. And so that was recent and vital and living memory. But Fort Mose, you know, it was built, lived, and died in the 18th century. And so I did not think it had the political impact. And it wasn't a burial ground, it wasn't a plantation. It doesn't have the moniker of slavery in a way that you get with controversial sites like that. You know, so the whole vibe or psyche that comes off that site is different in a way. But it was just as political. Talking to Kathy Deegan about her experience in the 80s, it was very polarizing. People didn't want them there. The white community in some regards thought it was a waste of time, and they thought it was going to put them in a negative light, something that happened, you know, 200 years before. And so we've, Lori Lee and I, when we proposed this with Liz, we were not greeted as, you know, as you know, with open arms. It was with reluctance, state parks and reluctance at the state level to allow us to get the permit, to allow us to access the site. It was not easy. There was roadblocks, there was foot dragging, there was impediments at several levels. And it's hard to say exactly why they're there. There was environmental impediments, there were other impediments. But we persisted. Just as Kathy and Jane Landers and those folks in the 80s persisted. We persisted, and we did it. And doing it in 2019 was like going to the moon. It was a series of, nightmare scenarios that kind of happened, kind of resolved itself. I mean, we finally just wore them down, I guess. I don't know. So it finally happened. And then 2020, COVID hit, and we didn't do anything. 2021, we accessed the site only by, Chuck Mead's Deus Ex Machina. He came in at the last minute and said, "I'll give you a boat," because otherwise we were going to cancel the field school. And so with Chuck and the LAMP crew's help, we were able to access the site in limited way in 2021. At least, we did archaeology as hard as it was. And then they gave us momentum to get the National Park Service grant to do this work in 2022 and in 2023. So we'll be back next year. But yeah, I mean, what you find is that all archaeology is political, because it deals with people's stories about themselves and about their ancestry and about their history. But some archaeologies are more political than others, and this archaeology was pretty political. If you care enough about it, then you'll grit your teeth and jump through every hoop necessary to get it done. The problem with Mose is that it's not stable and it's not safe. I mean, with sea level rise, we know it's going to be eroded out in 30 to 50 years. So it's not something we can treat casually and slowly and carefully and methodically, and eventually we'll get it done. If we don't get it done in 30 years, most of the site will be gone or largely inaccessible. It'll just be eroded away. So there should be a greater air of urgency that is not being expressed or felt at the state level. So I don't know what's going on there, but maybe that will change over time. We'll see.
All right. Well, do you have anything else you want to add, maybe?
No, I probably said too much.
No, it was all great.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you for your time. That's it.
All right, thanks.